This is the DRF Players Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatal. This is show 242, the last show in May, the May 30th edition. I'm back with you, coming to you from the Brooklyn bunker today. Muggs, the handicapping Labrador, is here, but more importantly, also here from the planet Texas, he is the people's champion. He is Jonathan Kinchin. JK, what's up?
What's going on? A little lake adventure yesterday, so recovering from that, but everything's good.
A lake adventure? You're going to have to describe that in a little more detail.
Well, our friend, we've talked about him a few times, Jake Ballas, he's from Texas originally. That's how we became friends. His family has a lake house in Austin, so we went and hung out there yesterday and went and cruised around on the boat for a while. So it was a little cloudy this morning when I woke up, but feeling better now.
I'm picturing you dragging off the back in an inner tube with a mimosa. Do I have that about right?
No, I didn't do any of the water variety of sports. I just the only liquid I was consuming was adult beverages, but not mimosas.
Not mimosas, though. Notice I didn't think there was any danger of you water skiing there. I went straight for the inner tube. That definitely felt like more your style. As it is mine. Nothing wrong with getting dragged behind a boat on a lake, though. Typically for me, it's up in Maine, not out in Texas. Did you get to do any gambling yesterday or the rest of this fine Memorial Day weekend?
A few spots here and there yesterday. Nothing major. It's kind of hard when you're running around, spotty Wi-Fi. We before we headed out on the boat, Jake's filly Berta Diva ran in a stake at Canterbury. So we watched that. Then we needed a little cooling off session for Jake after the ride he got from Dean Butler. I guess they don't save ground at Canterbury. I mean, he somehow had the filly four wide all the way around and let her rush up. It was tough. So a costly fourth black type would have been pretty valuable for her if she could have hit the board. And she was good enough to hit the board with a better trip.
Sounds that way. She's good. I mean, she's one of the ones who was one of the tip-offs on, I guess it was Oaks Day, that the inside might have been not the place you wanted to be on the turf, as I recall, was sort of stuck down there and didn't really find after a good trip. But with the excuse of the turf, and now with the excuse of running wide, perhaps a future selection when back in the right spot for those connections. We'll keep an eye out for Berta Diva and where she turns up left. On the show today, we're going to talk a little bit about racing from the weekend. We are also going to play a round of Belmont Day buy, sell, hold, and I think we should have time to check in for a little WWJKD feature we haven't had a chance to do enough on the show, where we get to have listeners send in parimutuel problems that they've had, and we can ask Jonathan, what would you have done in this situation? Perhaps our most sacrilegious segment. That will be fun. We'll get to that in a little bit. First up, let's talk about Lady Eli and her win in the Gamely. Great to see her back in the winner's circle. First off, just the basic question, Jonathan, what did you think of the performance?
Well, I thought it was good. I mean, it wasn't flashy by any means, but I also think she was kind of taken out of her style a little bit. I think she was forced to sit a little bit closer, and what could have been a problem for her if a Vins were to get away. And Irad was smart enough and had a heads up ride to keep her close. And the Baltus filly, who in hindsight was a horse that I think people should have probably considered a little bit, considering her run at Keeneland off a wide trip and was closing at the same pace that the same situation that Lady Eli was. So I don't think that was nearly as shocking as a result as some might think with the 4 Good Year for Roses, I think was her name. But I thought she ran well, and good for her, and what a cool story, considering what she's had to go through health-wise. And I believe she's a Grade 1 winner at 2, 3, 4, and 5. Is that correct?
That sounds right. I'd have to check the schedule again from last year to make sure that was a Grade 1 that she won. But it's been an amazing run from her. Did you play the race either through the windows or in any of your tournaments? I'm curious. I felt a little bad once we went off the air on Friday, realizing we should have touched on that race. Just curious to get your thoughts on how you played it and what you thought about it going in.
Most of the tournaments that I played in, found a way to exclude that race based on the likelihood of the short price.
Five shot, yeah.
I had set in stone that I was going to play a really aggressive pick four, singling her, singling Stormy Liberal, also, and then I just kind of got cold feet. I got a little nervous about Avenge getting loose. I got a little bit nervous about Stormy Liberal somehow getting a weird trip with Mike drawn down the inside with the good horse. I can't remember that horse's name. I'm going to go blank on it. And then I didn't really like Honor and Courage, who was in the kind of the middle leg in a maiden race there. I wanted to bet Sonneteer, who was a Derby runner, the maiden that was finally running in a maiden race. And he got one of those curious Kent rides where we where we often joke. And then, so anyways, to long story short, I played it a little bit. I kind of got cold feet and didn't play it as aggressively as I planned on, but I guess it worked out.
I'm glad you got through that spiel without a Tiger Woods reference. So, yes, Lady Eli, in fact, the Flower Bowl was a grade 1. So yeah, there you have it. That stat is correct. Let me ask you this. I saw some chatter on Twitter between people I respect, specifically Candace Hare and Jay Privman, hearkening back to the 2014, I guess it was, Juvenile Phillies Eclipse. And there was a remark made to the effect of, history hasn't treated it very well that Lady Eli wasn't the winner of that award. And on one hand, I totally get it. But, I mean, I think back to that season, and I think back to Take Charge of Brandy, not only winning the Breeders' Cup, but then coming back and I think winning 2 more times before the year's over. And, I was in that. You didn't vote that year. I don't think you've ever voted for the Eclipses, have you, JK? You haven't done that yet?
No, never.
But so I was there and I checked the box for Take Charge Brandy. And even when I did it, I knew this isn't the horse I like the most out of this crop or anything. But I felt like, given the rules that I had in front of me, that I made the right decision. Feel free to beat me up here, JK. Did I make the right decision back in 2014?
Yeah, I think it's fine. I mean, she won the Juvenile Phillies on what most would say was a little fluky. And then she comes back and wins the Delta Downs, the Princess or whatever it's called. And then she wins the Starlet, which I think's a grade 1, or at least it is now, but it was a graded stakes at that point. So, I mean, I don't have a problem with people giving it to her. But I also wouldn't have had a problem if someone would have given it to Lady Eli. So it's I think it's not a big deal to me either way.
I certainly wouldn't have argued with anyone who decided the other way. It was just one of those decisions, like you stand there, you stare at the page, and you got to go one way or the other, and then you just sort of gut kicks in. Not unlike for me voting for. I was so convinced I was going to vote for Arrogant last year, and then when you sit there and you've got your instructions in front of you, and you got the PPs in front of you, and I just couldn't do it, and I clicked the box for Chrome. And again, same thing there. Not really something that I regret doing. It's you make the best decision you can with the information you have in front of you at the time, and I think that's the right decision. And I think hindsight can sometimes make that cloudier. Though in either of those instances, it wouldn't have argued with somebody the other way.
So it's your fault that we had to listen to that speech with Chrome.
It actually is. And if I'd known about that, maybe I would have thought twice. Other big action over the weekend, of course, we had the Gold Cup, a race in which we were not right, but it turned out you were wearing the right wig. Give us your analysis. What went down in the Gold Cup?
Well, I didn't see that happening. Well, American Freedom did his best Byron impersonation and took out Follow Me Krev, who I don't know if he was best, but the finish would have been significantly closer had he not been eliminated at the start. Gosh, I mean, I guess the biggest thing is this is my official I quit on American Freedom party. I kept wanting to give him chances, and he's continuously let me down. I'm not sure that it was the most ideal situation for him to be in that pretty significant pace duel, but he was done at the quarter pole, and so even in the pace was hot, I would have liked for him to stick around just a little bit more. So yeah, good for Cupid. Good for our friends at Coolmore. It seems as if there was a question, it seems like they've got a nice son of Tappet that they can now add to their amazing stallion roster, and a Grade 1 winner at 4 at a mile and a quarter, and a Graded Stakes winner at 3. And also I think at 3 and with the Rebel and stuff like that. So yeah, good for them. I'm not going to be betting any future wagers on Cupid to win any of the big summer stakes that we have coming up, like the Pacific Classic or the Woodward or anything like that. But I think it's also important to point out how loaded Bob Baffert is in the handicap division. He's got Cupid. He's got More Spirit. He's got another horse that we probably weren't going to get to, but let's touch on him, in Dancing Candy. And then he's got that big gray horse that we've all heard of. So look, I mean, that's a loaded situation, and I would imagine he's going to be shipping those 3 horses, obviously not Arrogant, but the other 3 around to kind of pick and pop some little spots here and there. I'd imagine we'll see a couple of them at Saratoga this summer, and at your random Derby in the mid-America, Midwest, popping up at Indiana and all these other different places.
Your wig might need a fresh coat of powder, I'm thinking, after all that. Cupid checks in with a 106 in the Gold Cup. Follow Me, Krev, who, I don't disagree with what you said about eliminated, but hey, he ran a winning race being eliminated. 102 figure there. American Freedom all the way back in 5th. And I was going to ask, so he's officially, are we going so far as to say the no bet list, or just no longer a horse to watch and give extra credit to?
No, I just think he's going to have to earn back my wagering dollar. I think in the next start, wherever he shows up, I just feel like he's going to have to earn it. And look, where is he going to, it feels like the races are only going to get tougher, right? What's he going to, is he going to show up in the, I don't know. What are they going to do with him, So
yeah, it's tough. It's not very Baffert-like to have a couple of clunkers. Like, everybody has a clunker from time to time, but when you get into multiple clunkers, you start getting in, a horse that's just not getting with the program.
And here's the thing, right? He had an excuse last time. He was wide on an inside track at Churchill in the slop. Fair excuse. And then some people are going to say he had an excuse this time with, fast pace, mile and a quarter, blah, 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 blah. But he's not a typical excuse horse who's going to be ignored on the tote board. He's still going to be 3-1 in his next start because he's Baffert. And so and he's going to be working well. So I'm going to have to let him beat me this time.
Yeah, you wonder, the phrase morning glory pops into head. Hopefully that's just being too harsh and he'll round back into form. As you can probably hear in the background, the delivery man not accommodating the show today. Upstairs, Muggs, the handicapping Labrador, is checking it out and raising all holy hell. We're just going to ignore that and continue right on with the next race we wanted to talk about. Another maiden, I almost hesitate to mention maiden winners at this point. We've had such a nice record with the last few we've talked about on the podcast, but this one I think we have to talk about. Rubelinda going out for Chad Brown at Belmont on Saturday. I believe Frankel's first winner in America. Nice little bit of symmetry, poetic justice, having the first Frankel go out for Chad Brown. The horse comes back with an 82 Beyer speed figure going I think it was 6 furlongs, because the final time, very fast looking, 108.3. What did you think of this performance? And is this one who you think has the look of a graded stakes runner down the line?
Yeah, I think we're 2 for 2, right? In our predicting this year of horses off their maiden wins of winning graded stakes with Yoshida and with Cloud Computing. I think we're going to make it 3 for 3 with this one. She seems pretty special. She was green away from there. Some people say she broke slowly. I just think she was just kind of green. And then when she leveled off, wow, that was something impressive. I think Larry Colmus got a little bit ahead of himself when he tweeted that that was the most impressive maiden win since Curlin for him that he's called, which, fair enough. I don't, but she's good, and I think she's got a grade one on in her future, probably at Saratoga this summer.
Let's talk about how far we think she wants to go. Being by Frankel, I mean, he could sprint. He was probably to his best effect at a mile, could obviously stretch out to the mile and a quarter. Looking at the dam side, I believe I have the right dam here, and more on the shorter side, but sort of the shorter side of Europe, meaning a mile, no problem, probably mile and an eighth, not even any kind of problem. But do you have a guess as to how far Miss Rubelinda is going to want to go?
I don't have a guess. I mean, I would assume she'll stretch out. And, before the race, some chatter that we had heard was that they were a little bit worried that 6 was going to be a little bit sharp for her. They wish they could have debuted her a little bit further. So that just suggests to me that she'll improve as the ground gets to be a little bit long. I don't know if they're gonna point this filly to the Belmont Oaks, or if they're gonna try to maybe take a more conservative route. I guess the confidence level will be illustrated by the decision that they make. But they were pretty aggressive with cloud computing, and he showed to reward them for that. So I wouldn't be surprised if they did the same thing with this one.
That'd be interesting. I mean, geez, that'd be going from 6 to I guess 10 in a second start. That would surprise me a little bit. I like better the plan of what you said about Saratoga, but we'll see. And sometimes when a trainer, and cloud computing is a perfect example of this, when a trainer sort of steps out of the way they usually do things, that's telling you that they're dealing with something special. When they make a move like that they don't have to make, where it's not the owner calling the spot, where the trainer wants to run the horse in the Preakness, or in this case, if it were to happen, the Belmont Oaks. I wouldn't leave off the tickets. I probably wouldn't be able to press the way that I'd want to coming back in one of those Saratoga, that great series of Saratoga races for 3-year-old grass fillies, going a little bit shorter. But we'll have to see. Definitely one to keep on the radar. And add to your list. Very successful weekend over at DRF Tournaments. We sent 3 players via the last chance to Monmouth. Unfortunately, if you're not already signed up for that Monmouth contest, you're too late. That one is closed. Did your name make the roster in the end, Jonathan?
It did not.
Tisk.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to taking that boat ride with you, but I believe our friend Eric Bilick, I believe some other, at least one, maybe multiple Matisses will be around. We'll be hanging out in the parterre boxes at Monmouth, and we'll drink a toast to you, sitting wherever it is you're going to be. Hopefully, you're not making the trip this time. Means I will be able to twist your arm to come join me and some of the listeners at this DRF podcast co-production with Naira and Revolution Brewery. And it turns out Angels Envy Whiskey, who are going to be joining our roster to do this day at the races on June 16th. You can leave from Barcade in Williamsburg in our party bus, or you can just meet us out there. There will be grilling, there will be chilling, there will be betting. It is sure to be a good day. So what do you think? Are you in for that at least?
I have my chances have improved for that rendezvous with my scratch of Monmouth. I got to figure out what I'm going to do for the Belmont Stakes weekend. So I'm going to come to New York or not. That will also obviously impact my decision. But I think the most likely weekend that I would appear would be for the mobile adult beverage convention.
Beer days. Beer days at Belmont Park. Yeah, beer days at Belmont Park. DRF Podcast, our first sort of official gathering. We've had many unofficial gatherings with listeners at the Paddock Bar and out at Belmont over the years, but this one, it should be a lot of fun. I encourage folks to check it out. As for your Belmont plans, DRF Tournaments this weekend, featured event in addition to running qualifiers every day to get into the grade 1 for the World Championship of Handicapping. We've also now got our last chance for the Belmont Stakes Challenge. There's a round 1 event on Saturday, and the top 20% of finishers advance to the last chance qualifier on Sunday. You can also buy into that last chance qualifier for $410. What's going into your Belmont decision? I mean, are you going to basically try to qualify, and if you don't qualify, you won't come, or is there more to it than that?
No, really, it's whether or not I want to tote around a 5-year-old in New York City and at Elmont, New York during the Belmont. It's really the deciding factor. So
I've got a babysitter for you if you want to do it. So keep that in mind. That offer doesn't go out to all the listeners, only you, JK. Just I don't want any strange tweets and calls. But all right, while we're talking about Belmont Day, let's get into a little bit of buy, sell, hold. We have a couple of bookmakers over in the UK have priced up some of these races, including we won't go through these yet, but it's just kind of fun to see that I think on the Friday is going to be the Belmont Gold Cup, and it looks like there's going to be some European participation in there. I don't know if we speculated about this on air, but Zukova's recent win in, I guess that was the Man of War, picking up a grade 1, might represent some sort of sea change where we start seeing a lot more European invaders for turf races, folks thinking they can come over here and plunder our purses. But so that'll be something to monitor. Looks like we'll have a few shippers for the Gold Cup. But let's start our conversation with the Met Mile. Current favorite at the bookies right now is Connect at 5-2. Let's assume non-runner, no bet. So in other words, you could take the bet and the horse doesn't show up in the gate that day. You don't have to do the money. But 5-2 is your inclination to buy, sell, or just sort of pass and monitor for the moment?
Sell.
Okay.
I mean,
not a believer?
No, I'm a believer, but I just when you start rambling off some of these other names, 5-2 just doesn't sound good enough for me.
That's a good point. And why don't I'll run through the horses who are priced up. If you follow all the latest news on DRF.com, great reporting from the likes of Dave Grenning on who's going to be showing up. You'll get a much more accurate view of what the current lineup is expected to be. But this is just what we have in bookie prices right now. Here's some of the horses who are priced up. Connect, More Spirit, Collected, Stanford, Watershed, Sharp Azteca, Neolithic, Awesome Slew, Tommy Macho, Birdsong. Who of those do you want to play? Who do you want to do next?
How about More Spirit?
More Spirit, 5-1.
Sell.
Really? You're like the world's biggest More Spirit fan.
Well, I just thought, I'm a fan of him winning. I think what I said earlier this year was he was going to win all those little grade 3s. You know, he's just going to win a bunch, pick those up like crazy. I think he's dangerous. However, at 5-1, I would just need a little bit of a better price against these horses.
That's fair. I was thinking that might be one where you at least held, but how about Sharp Azteca at 7-2?
Oh, you're killing me with the prices. So I actually like Sharp Azteca. Just a pre-handicapping note, just to keep in your mind. I want there to be a lot of pace in the race, and I want Sharp Azteca in the race. Because I remember Jorge Navarro saying before the Dubai World Cup on interviews that he knows it sounds crazy, but this horse is so much better in a duel than he is loose on the lead. And so I want to give him a shot in this spot. Hopefully if it shows up that there's a lot of pace, then people will kind of get off of him and get a better number. But I'm interested in him, but not at that price.
I ran through the rest of the names. Is there somebody who you think might be a price you'd be interested in, or are we just going to be selling everybody at this point?
Is Collected? Are they gonna run it on turf for him, or?
There's been no talk of that I know of, so we know where you stand there. 6-1 right now, Collected. How about any of these longer shots? Are you a Stanford guy at 12-1? Watershed 12-1. Tommy Macho 12-1. Do any of those three appeal to you?
I think Watershed is interesting because and this isn't my original thought. This is something that Nick Tamero always said, that he always felt like, following New York as much as he did, he always felt like Watershed should be cut back. And so I've tried to beat Watershed, going, 11, 9, 12 furlongs, and he keeps kind of running well. So I'd be interested in him at a price. Obviously, Kieran knows what it takes to kind of cut a horse back and win this race. And if you can remember our great friend Frosted. So Watershed would be interesting to me at a price cutting back. But it feels like a race where I would want to be alive to 3 horses and multis. Like, it doesn't feel like one where I want to try to nail something on the nose. So just have to see how it progresses.
Speaking of Kieran, Mohayman also in the betting at 25-1. Does that do anything for you before we move on to the Phipps?
No, Mohayman's gray, isn't he?
He is.
I mean, I guess maybe if he could like somehow switch the lip tattoo with frosted, then maybe Mohayman can win. No, unfortunately I think he's probably one of the more overrated horses we've seen in a long time.
All right, let's go on to the Phipps. We're just going to do one horse here. Songbird at 1-2. Buy, sell, hold.
Sell, because I'm gonna make you say one other horse that I'm gonna say I'm gonna buy.
Okay. Is it a horse we've talked about many times on this podcast?
It is.
Perhaps Karina Mia at 10-1.
Yes, she's gonna get Songbird at her game, the one turn game, and I think that unfortunately, Songbird's gonna kind of get punched in the nose to start her season, and then as the distances go a little bit further for her, she'll pick up back to where she left off as being one of the top mares in the country. But I think Karina Mia might get her on this one. Second off of a layoff, off of what was an impossibly wide trip on what was a well publicized inside speed day on Derby Day, and I think she'll definitely find a way to turn the tables on Songbird, and I think she'll run really well. And hopefully, what's the price on her? I don't care. I'm going to take it because I know it's going to be better than what it should be.
10.
Yes.
Where
do I sign?
All right, there we go. Unusually bearish for you so far today. I love the Brits on this website. I was looking for the Manhattan and I couldn't find it. It's like they actually have the Manhattan listed after the Belmont Stakes. The turf prejudice coming through. Lots of interesting names here. The market leader, Time Test at 11-4 right now. Your friend Divisadero in here at 6-1, and your nemesis in a lot of ways, Wake Forest, also listed in the betting here at 12-1. Feel free to either go for all of those or just cherry pick if you have any buy, sell, hold thoughts on those three runners.
Oh, this is like a silly one. It's like someone asking me if I want ice cream.
I assume that means you're all about Divisadero at 6.
Yeah, I'll take even money on Divisadero. No, I'm joking. Yeah, no. I mean, here's the thing: is if he won that last race, closing into that slow pace, and he was kind of on the inside for a lot of it. I mean, he's a good horse, and I think that he's obviously had some breaks in there, so I think he's kind of had some issues along the way. But he seems to be in great form now, and I'm looking forward to watching him run. I hope he can stay healthy for the rest of the summer and lead right into the Breeders' Cup.
World Approval at 9-2. One more I'll mention in the Manhattan. Does that do anything for you?
No, Divisadero's beat him before. World Approval was impressive. Don't get me wrong at Pimlico. I think he's a really cool horse. He's mean as hell. If you guys didn't know that, like if you walk by his barn, he will bite you. You got to kind of like swerve away from his stall. But he's a mean joker. But no, I thought he ran really well. But this is one of those tricky things that it's gonna be hard to get me off of Divisadero. And I don't think 9-2 is all that fair. I mean, I would think you might even get a better price on him.
All right. Now, is that World Approval knowledge firsthand, or have you just heard stories? Is he gonna sue you for defamation here? What's going on?
No. I've seen it. Like we went to I don't remember when it was. We went to go see Tepin, Travis Stone, and Nick and I actually think Robert was with us too. And Norm like warned us, like, do not turn your back on this horse. He will bite you. And then Norm went over to kind of like try to pet him, and he was trying to bite Norm. Like he's a nasty thing.
When you bite the hand that feeds you, you know that you've got some personality issues. Let's talk about the Belmont. I think just for fun, we'll just roll through the probables that they have listed here, and we'll just give your quick just gut, and then we can go back and discuss any that we feel like. Classic Empire 2-1.
Sell.
Looking at Lee 5-1.
I would sell it to my own mother.
What does that mean?
That means that like I wouldn't even talk her off of it. I would just take the bet and take her money.
Epicaris 9-2.
Buy.
Interesting. Irish Warcry 9-1.
Sell.
Conquest Mo Money 10-1.
Sell.
Gormley 12-1.
I would sell that in an exacta deal with my mom.
Just a couple more we'll do. There's a few more listed, but Taprit at 14.
Buy.
Yeah, I'm with you there. That's why I mentioned that one. That's very interesting. A horse who the more you think, the more you accept our initial, view of what happened on Kentucky Derby Day in terms of the track, the more appealing he becomes. And he just has that Belmonte look, doesn't he? Of the run in the Derby and then take the 5 weeks and come back and do better. J Boy's Echo at 20.
Sell.
All right. Well, there you have it. So you're the one I want to follow up with you about is Epicaris with the 9-2. What's going into your decision of wanting to buy that?
Oh, it's just a little bit of the thought that I was interested in Thunder Snow. I wanted Thunder Snow, and Thunder Snow had a great account of himself this weekend when he showed back up on turf and ran into a little bit of a freak, but ran well, especially with all of the back and forth travel and all the stuff that he kind of went through, the quarantine, the dirt training, and then he comes back and he runs in a classic in Europe and runs well. So I think that race in Dubai was good, and I think Epicaris is going to run well, and so he's been kind of sitting in the wings a little bit like Tonalist, keep a microphone away from the California Chrome connections, but I think he's got a shot at running well.
A cowardly Belmont Stakes win, perhaps, in the offing. I guess by that definition, the race would just be, well, no, I guess looking at Lee and Classic Empire, potentially running in all three. But let's pause for a moment on what you said about Thunder Snow running at the Curragh over the weekend. What I thought was a very good second to the super impressive Churchill. Did you watch the tape of that race?
I did. It's hard for me to see what the hell's going on in those races because it feels like they're running straight at you in the video. I can never tell who's moving, but it was impressive. Absolutely.
The blur at the finish line was Churchill. Just amazing. Got to keep in mind they're running on some soft and heavy ground, so the action looks a little different than we're used to also. But Churchill, very interesting, and a horse who we might have to give a little bit of a look. Now, it would have to be a huge price running against the one they call Arrogate in the Breeders' Cup Classic, but may have to give a little bit of look. I don't even see him priced up over there for the Classic. I wonder if certain friends in Las Vegas might have an opportunity to take a look there, because that's a super talented horse, and it's going to be fun to see what he does over the course of the rest of the year. All right, that's
the breeding. He's Galileo, right?
Yeah, I think he's a Galileo. So dirt can happen. We'll call that a day for buy, sell, hold, and we'll move directly onto our other game we're going to play today before we wrap up today with a couple of different things, including some listener questions. But this one comes from Sam, who was feeling very frustrated on Preakness Day, feeling like he left money on the table. He handicapped 8 races, and in those 8 races, he had the winner in 4, and in 2 of them, he also had the exacta. He handled 120 on the day, ended up 48. Looking back at the day, he felt like he was upset that he didn't have vertical bets in the races where he had the exactas. He didn't bet them because they were favorites, and the payouts didn't seem worth the risk. And so he shied away from playing. So part of his question here is, if you pick a low-paying exacta straight, should you go ahead and bet it, or would you be more inclined to go for the trifecta with your shorter priced horses on top in that situation? What would Jonathan Kinchin do?
You know, I used to think that the answer was you play the trifecta, right? You if you like just we're a 10-horse field, right? So you like the 1 with the 2 with the 4, 5, 6. To me in that situation, it matters what the 4, 5, 6 are. If they're 7-2 and 4-1 and 7-1, then like there's really no value there because you can get beaten that third spot by some senseless horse. Just play the exacta straight. I mean, I don't usually have these problems. These, I was right, but I didn't make any money. If I'm right, I usually will make money, but I'm wrong a hell of a lot more than I'm right. And so my frustrations are typically like, wow, I shouldn't have bet that much on that horse, or I should have been a little bit smarter. And instead of trying to have a $4 pick six on Derby Day, I could have used Arklow and saved money and hit for 400,000. Like those are my nightmares. My nightmares are typically not the other way around, where I wasn't aggressive enough in my selection. So, you have to decide what's best for your appetite when it comes to what did the Whitmore AP Indian exacta pay. And you also have to remember that you're going to be, you were fortunate on this day to be right about these two. You're going to miss those a lot more than you hit them. So you got to make sure that you kind of keep that into consideration when you're trying to decide what's best and which way you should or should not have played it.
The segment isn't WWPTFD, but I'll go ahead and throw in my own 2 cents. I would say some of these decisions relate very directly to your bankroll. If you're looking at a day when you're only planning on handling 120, I would say, generally speaking, that the trifecta should not be on the menu. It's just a bet that because of that extra leg and the extra permutations, unless you have a super specific reason to play it, I don't know, a pace angle of a long shot who you think could clunk up for third behind your two horses you like in the exacta or something like that. Keep it simple, keep with the exacta. And I mean, Jonathan, you're not, obviously you've shown in the past, you're not afraid to go ahead and bet a straight number in the horizontals. Do you feel similarly in the verticals in general? I mean, are you apt to bet 100 or 200 just cold exacta the same way I've seen you do pretty much every time we go to the track in the horizontals?
No, the reason I like it in the horizontals is because I feel like your interests are aligned with the owners, the jockeys, and the trainer, right? Like, it's the same reason that I in my earlier life, I would bet like sports, but I got away from it. I mean, unless I'm in Vegas or something, I'll do it. But, betting sports, because to me, if you're betting the Spurs -6, your interests are not aligned with, with the staff from the Spurs, Popovich, with Tim Duncan, with LaMarcus Aldridge, with Ginobili. They don't care about your -6. They just want to win. And I feel like that happens in racing as well, is that, horses are taken care of, they get wide trips, they wrap up, they get into trouble. Their interest is not always to get second. But when you just need a horse on top, I feel like you get the maximum effort because that's what it's just my personal preference.
I think it's a great point. I think I've played that way intuitively for years without even knowing why. And I think your analogy to sports is really good. And I think you use the perfect phrase. Your interest and the team's interests are aligned. An exception to me where I think the exacta might still be a great play, again, gets back to the idea of having a pace angle. Sometimes you'll see two horses, but they're not two horses who are going to duel, but they're just going to kind of run around the track 1-2. You'll see when you see a situation where the horse you like to win is going to be the loose leader and the other horse is just going to be pressing and running in behind him. That situation makes more sense vertically. The other problem with the verticals is a lot of times, getting back to your sports analogy, in an effort to win the race, that horse won't even finish second. They'll finish 8th, and you'll get what we call a suck up situation in second and third. And that's one of the reasons why when we're handicapping, and this is one thing that Timeform US is super helpful for, when you see these hot paces, very often in the hot pace, you'll sometimes see a monster horse just go ahead, they win despite the hot pace. But the second best horse isn't the looking at Lee, perfect trip up the rail, suck up for second. It's somebody who competed early in the pace battle, lost the pace battle, and then ends up looking a lot worse in the war. Whereas if that same horse had run the race trying to finish second or third, they would have had a lot greater chance to do so. Do you agree with all that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, and plus, just like my mind doesn't, my mind, just because of the way I've, being a multi-race player, my mind and my race design and how I see races being run and all that stuff, it doesn't, it, it has a really hard time predicting who's going to run second. I have a hard time saying, ooh, I like this horse, he's going to run second. My mind says, I like this horse, he can win. I like this horse, he can win. I like this horse, he can win. I don't ever say, oh, I mean, I'm not saying it's not a real thing. Travis and Nick are really good at this horse can run third. Mike Maloney's really good at this horse can run third. My mind says this horse can win, this horse can win, this horse can win, and so it's just it's something that I got to get better at. But it's kind of the way I view racing.
Well, I mean, I see what you're saying. There are reasons to get better at it. Some of the tournaments you play in, being able to do well in verticals is certainly, it's a club you want to have in your bag. But fortunately for you, the existence of multi-race wagers means you don't necessarily have to do anything. I mean, you can just keep going the way you're going and focus on, maybe the ability to make more bets where not as much needs to go right in terms of what's happening down underneath on your ticket. We've talked about this so many times, but it's an important point, so we'll bring it up again. Your wagering personality comes into play. But one thing I will say is if your wagering personality is tolerating high, if you, like, in theory can tolerate high risk and all that stuff, if you don't have the bankroll to match it, you're probably going to play a losing game. When you're talking about the kind of numbers like we're talking about in this WWJKD email, I'm going to say the wildest you're going to want to get is an exacta, and you're going to want to do as much as you can with wins and doubles. By cutting down the amount of legs, you can efficiently bet. You can put $20 in a race and efficiently bet it. You probably even put $10 in a race a lot of times and bet it efficiently if you're keeping that simple.
Right. And the other thing that's important, we've talked about it a bunch on this show, is betting into trifectas, pick threes, pick fours. It's great. We all enjoy doing it. It's so much more complicated and so much more volatile than it is to bet into the exacta and the double, because you can always keep an eye on the probables and you can understand what it is you're actually trying to accomplish. You can bet $10 on world approval with projected and get back $55, and then you can see that you can bet projected with world approval for $8 and get back 40 something dollars, and you have an idea of exactly what's going to happen, because you're not betting into a blind pool, such as the trifecta, the pick four, pick three, all that stuff.
Yeah, between the transparency and the lack of that extra leg, if I were better at math, I could just rattle this off, and I can't. But the amount of possible combinations in any exacta versus any trifecta. I mean, if you sit there and you do the math of how many different things can happen, it really gives you a window into the degree of difficulty and how much it goes up with that extra leg. And with the transparency, it's just a lot more logical for players starting out, or even serious horse players, but who are on a budget, to try to keep it. It's such a complicated game anyway. Keep it simple wherever you can. And one thing that I've gotten a little bit better about in the last few years, when it comes to wanting to play complicated pick fours and pick fives and pick sixes, this is where having friends and potential partners, even if you don't play partners all the time, the ability to throw in with somebody else and therefore get the fun of being a part of the pick five. But I'd rather have 10%, much rather have 10% of an efficiently bet pick five or pick six than 100% of one where I know I'm taking a knife to a gunfight because my budget doesn't allow me to bet it efficiently and also have that be the way I want to play within my whole wagering portfolio. In other words, I can find the money to make these bets, but I would much rather be investing more in the bets where my strike rate is higher. That's another reason why I would advise a lot of players to play more win exacta double, because you're going to be able to hit more. You're going to keep your capital flowing. You could be a great player. You could be a really good bet writer. And you're playing pick fours and pick fives, and just the randomness of it, you're going to have these streaks where you miss 20 bets in a row, more sometimes, and you have these excruciating beats. Maybe there's some people out there who it doesn't matter to them. That's not going to affect their horse playing. For me, it's, I've gone through some summers where I focused on pick 4 and pick 5, and come about the beginning of Travers Week, when you've had some bad luck, it can be very frustrating, and it's very hard to continue to bet correctly. So that's just another factor to consider when you're choosing these bets. Anything more to add on that, JK?
No, I think you nailed it.
Good deal. All right, let's move on. We have a tournament strategy question. Joe wanted to know what our general advice is for playing 2 entries in a tournament. I'll let you start with that one.
Well, this is funny. Matt Bernier and I had a conversation this weekend about this.
Matt Bernier, who was up in Toronto at the trip that we weren't invited to. That Matt Bernier.
Yeah, they had enough of us. Huh? They were tired of they were pissed off about all my Canadian bacon comments. I guess it just backfired on us. So
female bacon. Anyway,
I honestly think what happens is the great country of Canada's got a pretty prideful track record in tournaments, and there's no need for us anymore. They got Brian Troop, who's a Canadian who's won the NHC, Ray Arsenal, who's a Canadian, has won the NHC, and then Tommy Masses, Canadian as well, and won the BCBC. So I think that that's probably we got bumped for better talent and in country talent. So.
In truth, it all made perfect sense. I was just clowning around. I'm looking very much forward to hopefully getting up there for their September tournament, and hoping maybe we at DRF Tournaments can get some qualifiers going for that. I need to try to make some phone calls and kick that in high gear. But back to the issue of multiple entries in tournaments.
Right. So here's 2 different ways. There's the all-in format, which is significantly different than the live. We'll start with the all-in format, which is the one you'll see on most weekdays, and occasionally on the weekend. And kind of the lower level feeders that feed into the bigger stuff are usually all in. The way that I treat all-ins, this is something that has changed for me in the past. I used to treat them like an A and B ticket, where I would have like all of my A horses I would put on one, and all of my B horses I would put on others. And then most of the time what I would do is I would typically have the same A horse, sometimes, but not all the time. And what I realized would happen is that my second entry was just kind of my get lucky entry, where essentially I was wrong 7 times, and it just so happened to be that it happened to be wrong on the right ticket, and I got in. I didn't like how I was kind of spending my money doing that. And what I've made a new rule for myself in all ins is that 70% of my plays have to be the same on both. So if I'm going to play 2, I have to, because when I'm right, I just want to be right. And then there's a couple of spots where I can spread a little bit. Because what would happen is I would like a 6-1 shot. I would use the 6-1 as an A horse, and I'd use the 8-1 as a B horse. The 6-1 would win, and then I would zig and zag, and I wouldn't get where I needed to get. So what I've decided to do was I'm going to now use at least 70% of the races. I'm going to have the same on each. And if I don't have those, then I'll only play 1 entry. Now, go ahead.
I want to just interrupt for a second and just underline that idea that you've got the problem there is in a live format contest, you can play those 2 tickets, and then you can spread as much as you want early, and then whichever one hits, that one can become the good one, the one where you put your, let's call them A's and B's, your A horses, and then you could put your B horses on the other one. But in all in, since you're putting it all in before the contest starts, you're just sort of randomly then hoping that your second bet, you can't then get your best opinions lined up with the original B opinion that already hit, right? Am I?
Yeah. Well, yeah. The worst feeling in the world, and it was happening to me more often than not, is I would get to the last 2 races, and I would be rooting against my top pick because my second entry became my good one. So I actually wanted to be wrong. I want, and it's a conflicting emotion that I just kind of got tired of doing, and so I kind of made that rule for myself that I was going to do that, because you're rooting for your top pick who's 4-1 to not win, so that your 12-1 does win. Your 4-1 wins. You're pissed off, and so it's that's why I've made it where I have to use the same on a lot.
Now, talk about, by contrast, how you do it differently in the in a live format. Are you still looking to play? Some people will start out and they won't play any horses the same on the two, with the thought of it's so valuable to get on the board. They'll just go with a 6-1 on one and an 8-1 on another. They miss there. Then the next race, it's a 6-1 on the first one and a 10-1 on the other. And then the 10-1 hits, and then they sort of rejigger the whole strategy once they're on the board. That has proven to be effective for some people. You have an advantage with 2 entries until you get that first price. Is that how you do it, or are you doing a different approach?
Yeah, I do it differently. I think that, some people might think it's valuable to get on the board. I think it's valuable to get on the board. If you have 2 entries, to get on the board with both entries. So I would like to love a horse. I would like to love. So to me, there's love and like, right? So let me explain that. If I love one horse, I'm going to use that horse on both entries. If I love a horse, if I love 2 horses and I really can't split them, then I'll split. I'll use the 6 on one, the 8 on the other, and then whichever one hits, then that one will become my good one. But whatever. But I want to, when I look at the races, I want to pick the same horse on every entry so that I can get to a position where I can split up, where I can late in the race, or late in the sequence, not the race, late in the tournament, I can use 2 different horses that can get me to where I need to be. Because there's nothing better than being in first place, like first and second, which has happened to me a few times, where you're in first and second, you get to like block 2 people. It's the greatest. So, or you're in third and you need to get to first and you get to pick 2 horses. It's great too. And the only way you can do that is if you have conviction in your loves and your picks early, and you pick those horses the same on both entries.
The term is leverage. When you're in that position you described late, you have a lot of leverage. And so you can either potentially block 2 people if you're the one on top, or if you're third and fifth, you can't be blocked. The one player in first, I mean, I guess theoretically 2 different people ahead of you could block you individually, but your chances of drawing live in that last race go way up when you've got 2 entries in contention. So your preferred way is, it's almost like multi-race strategy. You'll have sort of your races where you have your A horse that you love going to play on both tickets, and then am I correct in saying that throughout the tournament, wherever you have a race where you view it in multi-race terms as more of a spread race, that's where you'll use 2 different runners?
Yeah, and I'll do that early if the the sequence is what's going to determine that for you, right? I mean, if I just feel like this is the best example. If there's a turf sprint, a 6 furlong turf sprint at Belmont, and there's a speed horse that has been running on dirt who has some turf pedigree, who's 12-1, and then there's a trip horse that got steadied at the start, going 5.5 or going 5 at Gulfstream, and is 8-1. I'm gonna spread in that spot. I'm not gonna just try to pick one of them. You know what I mean? But if there's a first time Chad that we hear can run, and the field doesn't look entirely complicated and the horse is 5-2, then I'll use that horse on both, and just hope that I can pick up those that $10 or whatever it is, and then I'm playing with fire the rest of the way.
There's a lot of different ways to approach it, but that to me sounds the ability, if you're going to play 2, I feel like those are the 2 right ways to go. Either try to get an advantage by catching a price early, or do it exactly the way JK does. And I'd say for either of those strategies to work, or to choose between the 2, knowing what's coming up in the sequence, you're at a big disadvantage. Even if you're playing in a live format and you can change your picks, I think it's very hard to navigate what your 2 entry strategy is going to be just completely going on the fly. To the degree that you can, to have an idea of what's coming up, to have an idea of which races are going to lend themselves to spreading and using different horse on both, as opposed to places where you can put the same horse in on both. The more information you can have about that going into the contest, the more of an advantage you're going to have, the more you're going to be able to leverage the advantage that having two picks can be. Is that something that's important to you, Jonathan, as well, knowing what's coming up?
No, not really. I mean, I try not, I try not to, like I've said, people always ask me, like, what's your goal? What do you think it's going to take to win? I have no idea, because I think it's hard to know, because you just can't really ever tell. One cap horse here and one cap horse there, and it completely changes what you think it should be. I do make sure, we talked about this before, and you wrote about it in your book. Like, I put all of my entries in. I put a horse in for every entry, so I have an idea of what my day is going to look like. But I don't make early decisions based on late opinions. I don't let my late opinion impact what I do early, or my early opinion impact. Well, I guess it wouldn't really impact because it's already over. But I just pick each race as individual. I look at them as an individual situation, and I don't typically make a race 5 decision based on my race 10 opinion.
Yeah, I guess I would agree with that. You don't want to make that decision based on that, but I just think you can get a sense when you have a sense of which races are spread races and which races are single races. I have to think, for a lot of players, and I think you just do it intuitively. You don't necessarily have to think about it, but I think for a lot of players starting out, that's not a bad idea. How does it change when you're talking about multiple entries in a live bankroll format?
What I've been doing lately in live bankroll tournaments is at Keeneland, I had, I had 2 entries, and it's, I guess the bankroll was $2,000. And I did it at Santa Anita as well. When you bet, if there's a $300 minimum, I typically just bet $300 on entry 1 and $300 on entry 2, and I just duplicate it. So if I bet 300 to win in the second race on the 4 horse, I bet 300 to win on entry 1, 300 to win on entry 2. I bet the same thing, because I feel like if you do it the other way, you're just trying to catch. I don't try to catch things. I want to bet my opinion, and so I bet it, and I try to push them both up, because I think that there's a distinct advantage in tournaments if you can have 2 entries, 2 opportunities that are in contention, and so I want both of them to move up. And that's kind of how I've always gone about it when I have 2 in live bankroll.
That makes sense. Somebody listening might say, well, why are you doing 2 if you're just doing the same thing? And I think the answer is because then when it comes to taking your all-in shot wherever in the contest that comes, you have 2 opportunities to take all-in shots as opposed to 1. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you like, if I can just keep my bankrolls going to the last race. If you have a $3,000 bankroll to start, if I can just keep my $3,000 bankroll at the end of the last race, you bet that whole $3,000 in there, you got a chance to win the tournament. Now, if I can get both of them to 3,000, and then I can bet the second to last race and the last race with those all-in moves with chances to win, it's significantly better chance of winning. If you can have them both into that place. I mean, I think a lot of people do weird stuff where they try to keep one, and they're aggressive with one, they're conservative with one, and that's great if that's how you do things. My mind doesn't work that way. So,
well, we've seen how these all-in shots are typically, I mean, almost always what wins these tournaments. So the ability to take 2 of them as opposed to 1 of them, I mean, that's just logical. It's really the same concept as we talked about when we were talking about managing multiple entries in Mythical. It's the idea of leverage, more leverage to be able to tilt the odds in your advantage. One last note before we get out of here today. I recently appeared on my friend Mike Pesca's podcast, The Gist. He does this great thing on The Gist that we're going to steal for today's show. He calls it the lobstar of the Antantwig. And I'm not even going to get into the etymology of the phrase, but basically the idea is that every few weeks he names someone, either a listener, a Twitter follower, someone who adds something to the overall conversation about the show, a listener, basically a way to give a shout out to a listener who does something awesome. And so our first listener award is going to go out to our friend Scott Calder. And this comes from a few weeks ago, where Scott was the absolute star of the NBC broadcast when he was the handler who took the camera crew around when they were talking to American Pharoah and talking about Pharoah's first crop, and Pharoah looked great on screen, and I texted Scott right away, man, you're famous, and he said, tongue firmly in cheek, especially in case anyone from NBC is listening, tongue firmly in cheek, he said to me, yeah, the NBC thing was really great, but my career highlight so far is still appearing on the DRF Players Podcast. So cheers to you, Scott. We appreciate your continued support, especially when you let us come crash in the conference room and do a show live from Ashford, Coolmore, America. Those were good times. A closing thought from you, JK.
Yeah. Etymology, is that the little green stuff they give you at those Asian restaurants?
That's wasabi.
Oh no! What's the little green little peas? The little peas that are so boring.
Oh, very good. Edamame.
Okay. All right. Okay. Just double checking.
Excellent. All right. That's all the time we have. I'm running into the city. Don't tell anybody I work with. I'm going to spend the next 4 hours watching a documentary about the Grateful Dead. We will be back on Friday. I want to thank Jonathan Kinchin. I want to thank all of you for listening, especially our honored listener, Scott Calder, and Sam for sending in that great question. We'll be back with previews on Friday of upcoming weekend races. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatal. May you win all your photos.